November doesn't like to behave. Every day this month, we found a real moment in history that felt like it belonged in a horror movie, a conspiracy form, or a glitch in the Matrix thread, and not in a textbook. Some of these stories are small and personal. Some shook entire countries. All of them really happened. This is November in the strange, a full month of true, uncanny, and downright uncomfortable history, all in one place. We'll move through November in order, day by day. Settle in, keep an eye on the date tags, and maybe keep one light on. Let's start at the beginning. On this day in 1955, something strange happened. United Airlines Flight 629 lifted off from Denver, bound for Portland. Minutes later, an orange flash tore across the Colorado night sky. The aircraft disintegrated midair, scattering wreckage across miles of farmland. Investigators found no sign of engine failure or collision. Then they discovered something chilling: traces of dynamite hidden in the luggage compartment. The bomb had been packed inside a single suitcase, belonging to Daisy King. Her son, Jack Gilbert Graham, had placed it there himself, hoping to collect on her life insurance policy. 44 lives were lost that night, not for politics or revenge, but for profit. On this day, in 1988, something strange happened. A computer program began to crawl through the internet, not to destroy, but to explore. It was called the Morris Worm. Its creator, a Cornell graduate student named Robert Tappan Morris, wanted to measure how big the internet really was. But a tiny flaw in his code turned curiosity into chaos. The program replicated endlessly, infecting computers at NASA, universities, and the military, slowing the entire internet to a crawl. It was the first digital outbreak in history, born not from malice, but a single miscalculation. And from that day forward, the world learned that even ideas, once released online, can take on a life of their own. On this day, in 1948, something strange happened. As presidential votes were still being counted, the Chicago Tribune rushed to print the morning paper. Confident in early polls, they declared a winner before the night was over. Dewey defeats Truman. Only he didn't. When the final results came in, President Harry S. Truman had pulled off one of the greatest upsets in American political history. By the time reporters realized their mistake, thousands of copies were already on the streets, and Truman was holding one up with a grin. A single photograph captured it all, the moment the news got ahead of the truth. On this day, in 1922, something strange happened. Deep in Egypt's Valley of the Kings, archaeologist Howard Carter brushed sand from a hidden stone step and found the sealed entrance to a forgotten tomb. When he peered through a small opening by candlelight, he saw gold. Everywhere, gold. It was the resting place of King Tut, untouched for more than 3,000 years. The discovery stunned the world. A boy king preserved in unimaginable splendor, and a mystery that came with whispers of a curse and death that soon followed those who disturbed his rest. A doorway to history, and perhaps something far older. On this day, in 1955, something strange happened. Or rather, it didn't. November 5th, 1955, is the day fictionally chosen by Doc Brown in Back to the Future. The moment he first conceived the idea of time travel after slipping and hitting his head on a bathroom sink. But here's what's strange. That completely random date became real-world folklore. Fans now treat it like a genuine anniversary of time travel itself, holding celebrations, posting flux capacitor memes, and even marking it on calendars every year. A date that never actually meant anything became legendary, all because one eccentric scientist in a movie decided it did. On this day in 1937, something strange happened. A quiet Oxford professor released a book that would reshape the world's imagination. The Hobbit, by J.R.R. Tolkien, introduced readers to a place called Middle-earth, a realm of dragons, dwarves, and one very reluctant hero named Bilbo Baggins. No one expected much from this little fantasy tale, but its success unleashed something deeper, a modern myth woven from ancient languages and timeless fears. Tolkien had spent years crafting every name, map, and melody, building a universe that felt eerily real. From that first hobbit hole sprang a world that still haunts our dreams and reminds us that sometimes the strangest journeys begin with a single book. On this day, in 1869, something strange happened. Long before cars ruled the roads, a new machine captured the world's imagination, the bicycle. On November 7th, 1869, nearly 100 riders set off from Paris to Rouen in the first ever intercity bike race. 80 miles of mud, cobblestone, and chaos. They rode heavy iron bone shakers, rattling across the countryside for over 10 hours. When the dust cleared, an Englishman living in Paris, James Moore, crossed the finish line first, his wooden wheels nearly destroyed. That day marked more than a race. It was the birth of modern cycling, and humanity's strange new obsession with speed, powered by nothing but muscle and will. On this day, in 1895, something strange happened. In a dark lab in Würzburg, Germany, physicist Wilhelm Röntgen was experimenting with electrical currents when he noticed something impossible, a faint glow shimmering across the room. It passed straight through solid objects, even through his own hand. He had accidentally discovered X-rays, an invisible form of light that revealed the bones beneath flesh, the first time humanity had ever seen inside itself without a single cut. Röntgen's strange discovery would change medicine, physics, and how we see the world forever. On this day, in 1518, something strange happened. In Strasbourg, a woman suddenly began dancing in the street. No music, no celebration, just frantic, uncontrollable movement. Within days, hundreds joined her. People danced until their feet bled. They danced through pain and exhaustion. Some reportedly collapsed and died where they stood. City leaders tried everything. Musicians, open halls, even dance-it-out orders, but nothing stopped it. And then, as suddenly as it began, the dancing plague ended. Mass hysteria? Poisoned grain? Or something far deeper in the human mind? The mystery still hasn't stopped moving. On this day, in 1996, something strange happened. In Ireland, the lotto jackpot was won by 3 different people. Nothing unusual there until the winning numbers were announced. Every number matched key dates from the life of the mystic Padre Pio, his birth, his ordination, and even his death. 3 separate winners, all using combinations tied to the same holy man on the same night. People called it coincidence. Others called it something else. A lottery fluke, a shared superstition, or a strange hint of the mystical slipping into the math? The odds say random. The story says otherwise. On this day in 1911, something strange happened. By noon, the Midwest was in t-shirts. By midnight, people were freezing to death. November 11th, 1911 delivered one of the most violent weather whiplashes ever recorded. Cities in the central U.S. hit summer-level highs in the 70s and 80s. Then, within hours, temperatures collapsed into the teens. Springfield, Missouri jumped to 80 degrees, then plummeted to 13. Keokuk, Iowa fell from 79 to 14. Records for the hottest and coldest November 11th were set on the same day. The cold front that caused it didn't just bring cold, it brought chaos. Tornadoes, hail, sleet, blizzards, wind gusts over 70 miles an hour. In Janesville, Wisconsin, an F4 tornado tore apart homes. Then the survivors found themselves standing in a snowstorm. The Great Blue Norther remains a chilling reminder. Sometimes the weather doesn't change, it snaps. On this day, in 1933, something strange happened. A man aimed his camera at Loch Ness and captured a shape so bizarre that 90 years later, no one can agree on what he actually photographed. Hugh Gray was walking his dog along the water when a large, twisting form rose from the lake, 2 to 3 feet above the surface. No head visible, just a violent, writhing shape, he said, moved like a tail. He snapped one picture, and that blurry image became the world's first alleged photo of the Loch Ness Monster. The Scottish Daily Record published it, and the legend exploded, but almost instantly, skeptics attacked it, saying it looked like Gray's dog holding a stick, or an otter, or even a swan. The original negative disappeared, sealing the debate forever. Long before the infamous 1934 hoax photo, it was this strange, uncertain image that sparked the Nessie phenomenon and launched nearly a century of sightings, stories, and speculation. On this day, in 1940, something strange happened. A movie premiered that confused critics, baffled audiences, and accidentally invented the future of surround sound. Walt Disney's Fantasia hit the screen in New York's Broadway theater, not as a normal animated film, but as a full-on experiment. Instead of telling a story, it let classical music drive the animation. Bach, Tchaikovsky, Beethoven, Stravinsky, paired with abstract imagery, dancing mushrooms, and cosmic dreamscapes no one had ever seen in a theater. But the strangest part wasn't on the screen. It was in the walls. Disney created Fantasound, an early stereo system that made music swirl around the theater decades before commercial stereo existed. Only a handful of theaters could handle it, which hurt the film's box office, but blew the minds of those who heard it. Critics were split. Some called it visionary. Others said it tainted classical music. World War II cut off European markets, and the project nearly bankrupted Disney. But over time, Fantasia became a cult masterpiece, reshaping animation, influencing film music for generations. and proving that sometimes the boldest risks leave the biggest echoes. On this day, in 1889, something strange happened. A 25-year-old journalist decided she could outrun a fictional man, and then proved it to the entire world. Nellie Bly was given barely 2 days' notice when her newspaper asked if she wanted to attempt the impossible, travel around the world in less than 80 days, just like in Jules Verne's novel. She didn't hesitate. She packed one small bag, boarded a steamship in Hoboken, New Jersey, and launched herself into a real-life race against fiction. Her 25,000-mile journey rushed her through England, France, Italy, the Suez Canal, Sri Lanka, Singapore, Hong Kong, and Japan, using the fastest steamships and trains of the era. She even stopped in Amiens to meet Jules Verne, who wished her luck, but doubted she could beat Phileas Fogg's record. Missed ships, tight connections, chaotic schedules, everything tried to slow her down. But Bly kept pushing forward, and after 72 days, 6 hours, 11 minutes, and 14 seconds, she returned to New Jersey to a hero's welcome, shattering Jules Verne's fictional time by more than a week. Nellie Bly didn't just win a race, she proved that determination, speed, and sheer nerve could turn an impossible story into history. On this day, in 1966, something strange happened. Two young couples were driving near the abandoned TNT area in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, when their headlights caught something standing on the roadside. It was tall, well over 7 feet, with enormous wings folded against its back, and eyes that glowed a deep, unnatural red. As they tried to drive away, the creature lifted into the air and followed. It didn't flap its wings. It didn't make a sound. It simply glided, keeping pace with their car no matter how fast they pushed it. That single encounter triggered a flood of reports from people all over the region. Firefighters, farmers, teenagers, each describing the same winged figure appearing on rooftops, in fields, and along lonely roads. 1 year later, the Silver Bridge collapsed during rush hour, killing 46 people. Many locals believe the sightings were connected, that the creature wasn't just an apparition, but a warning no one understood in time, whether omen, monster, or something stranger. The figure reported on November 15th became known as the Mothman, an icon of American folklore whose shadow still lingers over Point Pleasant and beyond. On this day, in 1957, something strange happened. Police in rural Wisconsin opened the door to a quiet farmhouse and stepped into a scene so grotesque that seasoned officers later said nothing in their careers ever compared. It began with the disappearance of Bernice Warden, a well-known shopkeeper in Plainfield. Her last customer was a soft-spoken handyman named Ed Gain, so investigators drove out to his isolated property expecting a routine check. But the moment they entered the shed, everything changed. Warden's body was found hanging from the rafters, butchered like wild game. Inside the house, the horror deepened. Chairs upholstered in human skin, bowls fashioned from skulls, masks carved from faces, clothing stitched together from body parts. Every room revealed something that should not have existed outside of a nightmare. Gain eventually admitted to murder and to raiding local graves to build what he called his creations. His crimes became the blueprint for some of the most iconic villains in horror: Norman Bates, Leatherface, and Buffalo Bill. On this day in 1957, the world learned that the most terrifying monsters aren't imagined. Sometimes they really are your quiet neighbor down the road. On this day in 1978, something strange happened. On November 17, 1978, CBS aired a Star Wars production so bizarre, so surreal, that it became the franchise's most infamous secret, the Star Wars Holiday Special. For 2 full hours, millions of viewers watched Chewbacca's family celebrate Life Day on Kashyyyk, with no subtitles, just uninterrupted Wookiee growling. And every few minutes, the story dissolved into something stranger. A Jefferson Starship performance broadcast like Alien Karaoke, a hyperactive cooking tutorial from a 4-armed space chef, a psychedelic VR fantasy meant for Chewie's father, and an animated detour that introduced Boba Fett before Empire Strikes Back even existed. The special was so chaotic that George Lucas reportedly wanted every copy destroyed. And in a way, he got his wish. It aired once, was never released again, and survived only because fans recorded it on VHS. A forgotten broadcast, a legendary misfire, and a strange little relic that Star Wars tried to hide, but never could. On this day in 1929, something strange happened. The ocean pulled a trick scientists didn't fully understand for decades. Just after 5 p.m., a powerful earthquake struck far off the coast of Newfoundland. But that wasn't the strange part. The real mystery began deep underwater, where the shaking caused a massive landslide, a hidden avalanche racing across the sea floor in total darkness. As it slid, it snapped one transatlantic telegraph cable after another, like something brushing past them in the deep. Operators across the world watched their cables go dead in sequence, mile by mile, almost as if something was running beneath the ocean. Hours later, the coastline of Newfoundland noticed the sea behaving oddly. Water suddenly drained away, then returned as a series of waves, rising far higher than anyone expected from a distant quake. It wasn't until much later that scientists pieced together the truth. The snapped cables had accidentally captured the path and speed of that underwater landslide, revealing the invisible force that created Canada's deadliest tsunami. A reminder that sometimes the strangest events on Earth happen where no one can see them, in the pitch black deep. On this day in history, something strange happened. Back in 1897, the town of Aurora, Texas, reported that a strange airship, not a plane, not a balloon, just something, crashed into a windmill and exploded. Locals claimed the pilot wasn't human, so they did the most small-town thing possible. They quietly buried the body in the local cemetery and marked the grave with a simple stone. Fast forward to November 19th, 1973. A researcher said he finally found that old grave marker, the one tied to the alleged airship pilot. It made the news that same day. And that's when the story gets weird. That night, the headstone disappeared. Someone went into the cemetery and removed it. Clean. No pieces. No tracks. no witnesses. Metal detectors still hit something under the soil, but the cemetery won't allow any digging. So whatever's buried there stays buried. A crash in 1897, a missing grave marker in 1973, and a mystery that refuses to go away. On this day in 1820, something strange happened. A massive sperm whale, an animal with a brain 6 times the size of ours, turned on the hunters pursuing it. The American whaling ship Essex was deep in the Pacific when the crew spotted an unusually large bull whale. After being harpooned earlier, the creature disappeared beneath the waves, then came charging back. Witnesses said it hit the ship with the force of a locomotive. The Essex splintered, water rushed in, and within minutes the crew found themselves drifting in small boats, thousands of miles from land, in one of the most remote stretches of ocean on Earth. What followed was unthinkable. Weeks of starvation, dehydration, and desperation. When their supplies ran out, survivors were forced to do the one thing sailors feared most: cannibalism, just to live long enough for rescue. Only 8 men survived. Their accounts later reached a young writer named Herman Melville, who turned this real nightmare into one of the most famous novels ever written, Moby Dick. Even stranger, the real whale didn't vanish into legend. It simply swam away. On this day in 1978, something strange happened. Ireland heard the sound of the end of the world, and it wasn't a drill. At 12:45 p.m., without warning, RTA radio cut into regular programming and played the actual national nuclear attack announcement, the one written for the moment a nuclear weapon was on the way. A calm, steady voice instructed listeners to prepare for an imminent strike. No test tone. No, this is a drill. Just the real script, delivered exactly as it would be in a doomsday scenario. People froze. Phone lines jammed instantly. Some families gathered together. Others believed they had only minutes left. What no one knew was that the message was never meant for the public. An internal test tape, meant for staff only, had been triggered by mistake. And for several minutes, Ireland lived inside a nightmare that wasn't supposed to happen. It remains one of the strangest broadcast errors of the Cold War. A moment when one wrong button made an entire nation believe the unthinkable was already here. On this day in 1995, something strange happened. A cowboy and a spaceman walked out of a computer and straight into movie history. Pixar's Toy Story hit theaters as the first movie made entirely with computer animation. Before that, every animated film was drawn by hand. Pixar's small team spent years building software powerful enough to make toys breathe, blink, and dream, one frame at a time. Each frame took hours to render on machines that overheated the office. But when it premiered, audiences didn't just see toys come alive. They saw the future of animation. Toy Story became a worldwide hit and forever changed how we tell stories on screen. Proof that imagination and a few gigabytes of patience can make the impossible feel real. On this day in 1963, something strange happened. The BBC aired the very first episode of Doctor Who, a show about traveling through time, on a night when the whole world felt like it had stopped. Just one day earlier, President John F. Kennedy had been assassinated. The airwaves were flooded with grief, and few noticed the strange new series about a mysterious man in a blue box that could go anywhere, and when. Ratings were so low, the BBC did something unusual. They replayed the pilot the next week. This time, people watched. What began as a quiet sci-fi curiosity became the longest-running television series in history. Proof that even in the shadow of tragedy, imagination can outlast everything. On this day, in 1971, something strange happened. A man calling himself Dan Cooper boarded Northwest Orient Flight 305 from Portland to Seattle. He wore a suit, ordered a bourbon and soda, and quietly handed a flight attendant a note. It said he had a bomb. Cooper demanded $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a refueling truck waiting in Seattle. When he got what he wanted, he released the passengers, kept the crew, and told the pilot to fly south. At 10,000 feet, over the dark forests of Washington, he opened the plane's rear stairway and jumped. No one ever saw him again. The FBI searched for decades. They found part of the money on a riverbank, but never the man. To this day, no one knows who D.B. Cooper was, or if he survived the fall, because on November 24, 1971, a man stepped into the sky and disappeared forever. On this day, in 1817, something strange happened. In a New York hall filled with skeptical onlookers, a performer from India named Senasama calmly lifted a gleaming 22-inch sword and swallowed it, blade and all. To Americans of the early 1800s, this wasn't a circus stunt. It was anatomical heresy, a feat doctors swore the human throat couldn't survive. Newspapers called it a marvel of Eastern anatomy. Ministers called it unnatural. Senasama, sometimes recorded as Ramo Sami, the Indian juggler, had brought an ancient Tamil Nadu art to the Western world. And when he performed again that winter in Brooklyn's Social Garden Room, surgeons reportedly examined his mouth afterward, still refusing to believe their own eyes. It became one of the earliest documented sword-swallowing acts in America, part science, part mystery, and all nerves of steel. Because on November 25th, 1817, New Yorkers paid to see a man do the impossible, and he left them wondering if their own eyes had lied. On this day, in 1977, something strange happened. Southern England was watching the evening news when the voice changed. A deep metallic tone cut through the broadcast. This is the voice of R'Lon, of the Ashtar Galactic Command. For 6 minutes, 500,000 viewers heard a distorted alien urging humanity to lay down its weapons and enter a new age of Aquarius. The image never changed, only the sound. Then, silence. The regular broadcast resumed as if nothing happened. Investigators traced the signal to the Hannington transmitter, but the culprit was never found. Was it a prank with a perfect inside hack, or something that slipped through the static? Nearly 50 years later, no one's claimed it, and Vrillon still echoes through broadcast lore. On this day, in 1937, something strange happened. A Broadway hit opened with a cast made up almost entirely of garment workers, people who spent their days sewing shirts and their nights roasting the powerful on stage. The show was called Pins and Needles. It wasn't born in some big producer's office. It started as a union revue put on by members of the International Ladies Garment Workers Union. By day, they worked in crowded factories. After hours, they crammed into rehearsal rooms to sing, dance, and poke fun at dictators, crooked bosses, and politics. What should have been a tiny in-house show exploded. Audiences loved it. The amateurs were suddenly playing to sold-out houses on Broadway. Pins and Needles ran for more than 1,000 performances, and even made it to the White House, where they performed for Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt, all from a late-night side project that proved the workers could steal the spotlight. On this day in 1960, something strange happened. It was Monday, November 28th, in the little Scottish town of Sauchy. 11-year-old Virginia Campbell was sitting at her school desk, struggling with the lid as it kept lifting under her hands. Her teacher, Miss Stewart, finally said, "Hands on your lap, Virginia." In front of a classroom full of kids, Virginia obeyed, and that's when the desk lid flew open by itself and slammed shut. Once, twice, 3 times, no one touching it. Later that same day, more odd things happened. The long wooden pointer by the blackboard began to tremble and rattle. The teacher's desk shook as if someone were kicking it from underneath. Virginia was nearby, but not close enough to be the cause. Doctors came, ministers came, psychical researchers came. Some blamed stress, others whispered poltergeist. But whatever it was, that Monday in Sauchy became one of the strangest school days ever put on record. On this day in 1960, something strange happened. 2 future Beatles, Paul McCartney and Pete Best, were arrested in Hamburg, Germany, for lighting a condom on fire. The story goes they'd been kicked out of their club and returned to collect their gear. The lights were out, so Paul pinned a condom to a wall, lit it for light, and called it just a bit of fun. The club owner didn't agree. He called the police, accusing them of attempted arson. No one was hurt, but the prank got them jailed overnight and deported from Germany the next morning. George Harrison had already been sent home for being underage, and John Lennon soon followed. It was a chaotic, embarrassing end to the Beatles' first Hamburg adventure, one that started their legend with a flicker of flame and a very strange headline. On this day, in 1954, something strange happened. A woman in Alabama was napping on her couch when a 9-pound rock from outer space crashed through her roof, smashed her radio, and slammed into her hip. Her name was Anne Elizabeth Hodges, and she became the first verified person in history ever struck by a meteorite. The space rock was over 4 billion years old, older than Earth's oldest fossils. Yet its entire cosmic journey ended in a tiny town called Sylacauga. Reporters swarmed her home. The U.S. Air Force claimed the meteorite, and neighbors fought over who legally owned it. Meanwhile, Anne just wanted to rest. Her bruise became a national headline. Scientists said the odds of this happening were so small it might never happen again. And so far, it hasn't. A celestial traveler crossed the universe, only to hit a sleepy Alabama housewife. If you made it this far, you've just binge-watched a whole month of history's oddities in one sitting. Thank you for traveling through November with me. If you want to keep going, subscribe to Today in the Strange. There's a new story waiting for you almost every day. Each one pulled from the real record. No fiction, no creepypasta, just the strange side of what actually happened. Because every day in history hides something strange.